starting in the 8th minute with Inter Milan building up initially with a 2-1, with Acerbi stepping out from central centre-back into more of a CDM role, and then ahead of him you've got the midfield and Dimarco taking various positions on this left-hand side, whilst Dumfries basically is playing as a right winger on the right. On this occasion they play it long and AC Milan are able to defend it, and lucky for us we get to see Inter Milan's other build-up shape. So instead they built up with this 3-3-4 shape. You've got Acerbi staying back this time, and your midfield. You do have Dimarco here, but I'm not including him as part of either of these threes because of just how much his position could vary on the left-hand side. This created a problem for Pulisic and his fullback Calabria. If, for example, he got the ball here and Pulisic wasn't quick enough to get out to him, then Dimarco was off down the wing and he'd be able to link up with Martinez and basically carry the ball through the AC Milan press, because other players would then have to step off given AC Milan's 4-2-3-1 pressing shape. So behind them, Krunic and Loftus-Cheek would have a ton of space in these wide areas to try and defend, and the movement of the Inter forwards creates space for others to then attack. Note also Mkhitaryan's position here. He's central, and so he's actually pressed, he's man marked, but later in the game, as the game gets more stretched, then he actually pops up on that right hand side and he essentially helps to vacate the central area. But he's also a problem in this wide side because they can use Dimarco's dynamism in that space and link up with Mkhitaryan to add just another body for Calabria and Pulisic and later Chukwueze to contend with, and it was exceptionally effective because they could overload that side. But then even if they couldn't get through on that left hand side, then there would be space, or at least more space centrally, especially given their forwards often were making runs, pulling the defenders back, creating more space, and with runners in behind, especially Thuram, that meant Martinez could drop off and link you. So it just created a lot of disorganization, and so here we get to see a little bit of that with Bastoni playing a longer ball, and he's playing this into Thuram, whilst beyond this you have a really clever run just off screen by Dumfries pulling Hernandez inside, making this long ball into Thuram easier for him to be able to get without too much difficulty. And so Inter get what they want, which is just a transitional game. They're exceptionally good in transition, and I think in the first half that's what really set the momentum in Inter's favour, all these off the ball runs. So they were able to obviously pull AC Milan's defence deeper, and even if they didn't want to play through the space, Thuram was really good at getting on balls and really aggressive at chasing balls in behind. And so Thuram here supported by Barella, with the furthest forward actually being Dumfries. But you can just see the disarray, utter disarray in the Milan backline and their defensive shape, and Inter try and capitalise on that with another forward pass, keeping the momentum going, having the supporting runners, and then even as it almost looks like it's going to break down, with the Marco having pushed up too, he's able to contest this 50-50, and so they get to keep possession and continue to assert dominance, create more and more momentum. And obviously with the track record in the Milan derby most recently, there was a sense of inevitability. Another arsenal in the Inter toolbox was Dumfries' long throw-ins, aiming for Thuram, with other players looking to work off it. Fortunately for AC Milan, it doesn't come to anything but a corner kick. Next, we've got this scenario in the 56th minute, Inter building up with that 3-2 shape, and now Mkhitaryan, as mentioned earlier, is pulled out for this left-hand side, with Dimarco running this left-hand side channel, at this point being defended by Chukwueze. And this is what I was trying to get at with regards to the momentum that Inter could build through their deep build-up, where as Dimarco links up with Mkhitaryan and continues to make his run, he's carrying an overload with him. And so we see Mkhitaryan able to get the ball back into Dimarco's path, and now he has a ton of space to work with, allowing him then to easily get up his head, not a ton of pressure, firing a ball into Thuram, and he's following his pass and move, pass and move. And then we've got other runners. We've got the rest of the Milan defense pinned by the fact that you have Martinez and Dumfries threatening to run in behind, and you just have a ton of space to exploit, as they did pretty much all game, in to pick the right pass. And again, Milan's defense, complete disarray. But fortunately for us, that allows us to finally see Inter Milan's 3-3-4 midfield shape, where Bastoni has license to be able to push up in its left-hand side, typically underlapping, but just helping to overload this left-hand side. You've got one of your centre forwards coming across initially to play as a wide midfielder, and then as they get settled possession, then Martinez will go inside the box to be another option for a cross. Because of the positioning of the Inter midfield, this space is vacated centrally, and Inter will look to try and get rotations going on in this left-hand side, eventually to be able to get either a runner in behind or to be able to whip across in towards the penalty area. And again, they've got Dumfries higher up the pitch as well. Obviously, this allows them to be able to counter press, but it also means you've got numbers in the box to be able to contest. Okay, next we're going to have a look at Milan's deep build-up and midfield shape, with Milan essentially playing this 3-2 and what for most of the game was a box midfield. So they had their right back Calabria tuck inside to become a second centre midfielder, with Krunic against what was mostly a 5-3-2 shape out of possession by Inter. Inter's press seemed to be triggered by Thuram. With this, the rest of the midfield would follow, and then typically your wide centre midfielders would look to try and press towards the available centre back when opportune. To facilitate the movement of those two wide centre midfielders, you would have the defenders try and pick up the top of Milan's box, which was Reginder's and typically Loftus-Cheek on this right hand side. Milan were trying to achieve a number of things, either getting the ball into those players in behind the Inter Milan midfield, or trying to get a little bit of space for their wide midfielders in Leao and Pulisic dropping, but the Inter defense was really stingy, and if it was in the wide spaces, the wing backs would track Leao or Pulisic and force them into passing back, and then centrally you would have those wide centre backs Bastoni and Darmian tracking the Milan centre midfielders when they drop. We get to see this occasion where Barella is now stepping out to Hernandez, and so Hernandez tries to play it down the wing, but as mentioned, Leao drops and is immediately clattered by Dumfries, who was touch tight. Okay, I mentioned how intense Inter's man marking was, but their press wasn't that impressive. I don't necessarily think it needs to be, given that they really enjoy transitions and are really good at it when in possession of the ball anyway. But I think these scenarios demonstrate the problem that they had against what starts off as a 2-3 shape, with Calabria holding a traditional right back position. Krunic and the other fullbacks hold a position quite high, and then Krunic drops, and typically he'll pull out towards this left hand side, and given how wide the centre backs are for Milan, that creates the space for him centrally, and Krunic was really good at being able to find a pocket of space typically towards this left hand side, and because Mkhitaryan has to respect that, he was also drawn towards this side, and that would just give Calabria relatively easy possession on that right hand side, and then they'd be able to advance. So on this occasion we don't see Calabria getting the ball, instead Kjaer does, and he's able to advance relatively easily. That 3-2 shape wasn't always a 3-2, it could be a 3-1 where Calabria or Krunic could stay as a CDM and the other could push higher up, and so it becomes a game of chicken. Will the midfield of Inter blink first and choose to drop or not? Here Kjaer is able to fire a ball into Giroud, and he looks to try and combine with Pulisic and the rest of the midfield, and so they try and build up on his right hand side. Note also Hernandez tucking inside to try and help Krunic now, given that the other centre defensive midfielder has pushed higher. Inter able to rebuff AC Milan's attack down that right hand side and force them into passing back. So they rotate, but most of the time they were locked down on this left hand side, so they were forced into playing it typically down the right or straight into Giroud when he dropped. But whilst a couple of his layoffs were good, he really struggled to get in the game, given just how aggressive the Inter Milan defence was. And so this typically was what we saw of AC Milan in possession, at least until roughly the 25th minute, at which point Inter were a little bit happier to drop into their 5-3-2 deep block, which we get to see an example of here in the 23rd minute. Getting back to the 12th minute again, I think this next phase of play shows the resilience of Inter's defensive shape, where even as they're able to draw Inter up the pitch, creating more space for them to be able to then play through Inter's press and create a transition in their favour here on the left-hand side. Even when the ball does eventually get into Loftus-Cheek, Mkhitaryan does just enough to force the ball back and allow the rest of his team to reset. And so what seemed like a little bit of potential is basically snuffed out. And so with that, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider sharing it on social media, subscribing, giving a like, goes really a long way. And with that, we're out.